way very soon. It's 10:15 at BBC Newcastle, Radio for the North East. Now, it's often said that we all have a book in us, but my guest this morning has not one, but 5 so far. Gary Toward, originally from Dipton in County Durham, and although he lives in Leicester now, he regularly returns here. So he's popped into BBC Newcastle to tell us more about the work that he's doing in the region. So morning, Gary.
Morning, Lisa.
So growing up here in the North East, nice childhood, happy childhood?
I loved my childhood. I think I can't look back and think there was anything bad about my childhood. It was like living in fairyland, really. I just played down the woods, and I played on the pit heaps, and I climbed up in the pit buildings. It was just like a massive adventure playground. I loved it. Every day was a sunny day.
It seemed that way when we were young, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it's sunny today as well. It's continued.
So you grew up in Dipton, which at the time, as you mentioned, pit heaps, a pit village.
Yeah.
But is it true that your mum, she wouldn't let you leave school to follow your friends down the pit?
Well, yeah, the pit had closed, the one right next to my door, really. That had closed, but there were lots of my family were still involved in coal mining. My granddad was crushed in the pit. He wasn't killed, other people were, but my granddad wasn't. And my mother said, "No, you're not leaving school. You're not going to the ironworks. You're not going to the coal mines. You're going to stay on." I've no idea what she thought I was going to do, but I was made to stay on, and that's what I did. I sort of did as I was told, and I ended up becoming a teacher.
Yeah.
And that was really because of one teacher that sort of inspired me, and I don't think he meant to do it. It was sort of purely accidental to inspire me to become a teacher. But I went off for an interview for the RAF in Newcastle. Talk about safeguarding these days. I sort of just got on a bus and didn't go to school, and ended up in the sort of RAF recruiting office in Newcastle, and failed the first interview. I'm badly colourblind. That's when I found out I'm badly colourblind.
Okay.
Got back to school the next day, and the teacher said, "Well, where were you?" And I explained, and he said, "How'd you get on?" I failed. "Why did you fail?" Told him, and he said, right, okay. It was my chemistry teacher. He said, "That's why you can't see the colour change in this test we're doing. I'm going to get you a different indicator." And he got me this different indicator where I could see the colour change where you were trying to balance the acid and alkali. And it was, I tell you what, it's so important to me. It's called bromophenol blue. I still remember it after all these years. And I thought, "You just changed my life. I want to be like you." So it was that particular point I thought, I'm going to be a teacher. And I did that for 35 years.
That's amazing. I mean, often we talk about teaching on the show. We have a lot of people in who, talk about inspirational teachers, or they are teachers. It's not like it used to be, is kind of a message that we get quite a lot. Is that true? Would you say teaching has changed over the decades?
Well, teaching has changed because there are new methods, but what hasn't changed are kids. I really don't like when the press have a pop at kids, or the social media have a pop at kids. They're not as good as they used to be. They're not as good as they should be. They're not as good as they could be. All of that. But I could sort of show you quotes from Aristotle moaning about the kids that he used to teach. Kids are kids, and they will sort of push your buttons, and they will try to sort of twist you and turn you, and sort of try to get away with stuff. They're programmed to do that. The kids when I started teaching in 1981 were no different to the kids when I finished teaching 2.5 years ago. Exactly the same. They were inspirational to me. It was the best job in the world.
So did you, saying that teacher there, that chemistry teacher, inspired you to become a teacher yourself, did you want to be that kind of teacher? You wanted to be the type of person, the type of teacher that would inspire another generation, or a number of generations, to be brilliant, I guess, to do the best they can?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, the fact is, every single kid, and nearly all the schools I worked in were really in challenging areas, in deprived areas. That was what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make a difference for those kids, because quite often I was looking at kids in front of me, and they might be kicking and screaming, not wanting to do what you wanted them to do, and that's the secret to sort of classroom management, getting the kids to want to do what you want them to do. If you looked at their background, they might have been brought up in a household where shouting was the norm. If you raise your voice at them, well, what do you expect? You think they're going to shout back? Well, of course they will. What it's all about for me, and I learned this very, very quickly in my early days of teaching, is it's about positive relationships, creating positive relationships, getting the kids to believe that you care about them, and they will do anything for you.
You left, you mentioned that you're not a teacher anymore, so why did you decide to leave? I mean, it seems like it was something that you loved, Gary,
I did.
So why leave?
Well, because I became a head teacher. And what I discovered, you won't get this on any government website, you won't get this in the Department for Education statistics, but I discovered that head teachers who go to 60 tend not to reach 65.
Really?
Yeah. And I could tell you that is true from colleagues that retired when I was a head teacher, other head teacher colleagues who went to 60. I could name you several that died within 2 years of retiring. So I thought, for a game of soldiers, I'm going.
Yeah.
And so I planned everything for 55, and of course set a business up with my deputy head who retired pretty much at the same time.
And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the books that you have published. You have a new book out as well. More from Gary after Gabrielle, which plays next at BBC Newcastle. Gary Toward and I are just comparing the fact that we went to the same school. Not at the same time, but there were teachers in common. And also, isn't it bizarre?
It really is. But teaching and schools are very, very small places around the country. I go and do a presentation in Exeter, and I bump into somebody I've taught in Exeter who's now a teacher, or I go to Liverpool and I bump into somebody that I've taught with in Liverpool, but I've never taught with them in Liverpool. I've taught with them in Milton Keynes. So it's a very, very small world. I always say never cheese anybody off in teaching, because you might suddenly sit in front of them wanting a job.
That's the same in radio, believe you me. So Gary was a teacher for a long time, is now an author, but also you left a couple of years ago and you set up a business alongside the guy who was your deputy head at the time.
Yep.
Tell us about that business then. Why did you decide to do that? What did you do?
Well, I think that when you're a teacher, you change lives and you make a difference for kids. And we just wanted to continue making a difference for kids. And between us, we had over 70 years of experience of doing that. So we thought, well, how can we do that? Well, we can have effect now on new teachers or on teachers, just passing on some of our experience, passing on some of the tricks that we know that work to get kids on board, to get kids doing what you want them to do. And so we set the business up. It's called Decisive Element. Sounds a bit of a bizarre name, but the teacher is the decisive element in the classroom. The teacher makes the weather in the classroom. Everything the teacher does creates the climate in the classroom. It's all about the teacher being the adult, the person that generates the atmosphere and the direction of the classroom. It's not actually about the kids. It's about the teacher getting the kids to buy into that brilliance, that positivity. A teacher that takes in stormy weather is only going to get stormy weather back from the kids. So that's what we do now. We wrote the books, which started with The Art of Being a Brilliant Teacher, and then we followed that with The Art of Being a Brilliant NQT, Newly Qualified Teacher. We added to that Brilliant Classroom Assistant and Brilliant Middle Leader in schools. And now what we do is we have a whole series of workshops and keynotes that we deliver around the UK and Europe.
Do you miss actually being in the classroom?
100%.
Do you?
There is, and this is where sort of being an author sort of gives me that hit. So yesterday I spent a full day in a school with kids where I was teaching them on an author visit. So I can get that hit back. What I don't miss being a head teacher is I don't miss Ofsted, I don't miss the Department of Education, I don't miss that our government thinks that kids are all about data.
Is that what's changed then? Because you mentioned before that, in your opinion, children haven't changed at all, but something has changed, hasn't it, in schools?
I think there's huge pressure on teachers, there's huge pressure on head teachers from the government. That they far too easily compare the UK to other countries. I think we've got some of the best teaching in the world and some of the best teachers in the world. We've got a fantastic educational system, and there's a huge burden on teachers with bureaucracy, paperwork, and justifying all sorts of data. It's so often forgotten that the difference that teachers make on the human side, humanizing kids, socializing kids, supporting kids, that never sort of comes up in most inspections. And unfortunately, the first thing is somebody's looked at your school, looked at the data, but you can't tell the difference that somebody's made to a child.
Talking a lot of sense, and as you mentioned, you published 4 books to help other teachers. We're going to chat some more in a few minutes, because actually you've recently published a book of fiction, The Magpie, and we want to talk about that. And of course we'll chat more about the stuff you do in schools, and right here in the North East as well. Gary Toward, my guest this morning here at BBC Newcastle. More from him in the next 10 minutes. You worked as a head teacher in different schools, and you've written 4 books to help fellow teachers. So writing, was that something you were always interested in?
I was always interested in reading. I never thought I could write. I always thought the people that wrote, there were some sort of highfalutin, sort of clever people that were, that
The
that
academics.
wasn't me.
Yeah.
And I never got that from school either. My English teacher never really gave me the confidence to write. And so I stumbled into writing because I was a design technology teacher first. And when I got a deputy headship, I wasn't employed to be anything but a deputy head. I wasn't employed to be a deputy head and a design technology teacher. So the question was, well, is there anything else you can teach? And I said, well, I'll have a go at anything, really. What do you want me to have a go at? English, okay. So from then on, I became an English teacher, and I think I taught English for 3/4 of my career, as opposed to what I ended up sort of doing right at the beginning that I was trained for. So I became an English specialist, and I started writing short stories for the kids I was teaching to try to motivate them and to try to engage them in reading and writing.
So, The Magpie, then, this is recently published a fictional book, and you've brought a copy in today. Tell us a little bit about this, then, Gary.
Well, I wanted to write a crime novel, and I wanted to write a historically accurate crime novel. I like historical novels. I like crime novels, so I thought I'd put the two together. But I'm also fascinated by World War One.
Right.
So I thought, well, it's got to feature World War One, and not only that, it's got to feature where I grew up. And it's got to feature things that I know about in the Northeast. So there's an awful lot of the Northeast, and people will know places. You will know some of the places, you will have driven past them. So places like Hartlepool feature there, Durham features there, Durham Cathedral features in it, the River Wear Sacriston features there. There's a whole bunch of things. And there are football matches
Is it
that
true?
features
Because
in it.
you're a Newcastle fan, aren't you?
I am.
But it's Sunderland that actually features in the book.
It's Sunderland that actually features in the book. A massive game between Sunderland and Aston Villa, I think somewhere around 1911, which is actually did happen. I've made it historically accurate. The book, if you read it, the history is all accurate. Obviously, the story is fictional, but when it gets to the trenches, it starts in Durham. The first murder occurs on the footpath by the River Wear, and then the main protagonist, the main character, is a police detective who's become a policeman, a bit like me, because his mother wouldn't let him go down the pit because his mother was killed. So I've used my own experience there. He decides that he needs to follow this killer out into the trenches to catch him, because the killer, he believes, has gone there to hide amongst all of the mayhem and to carry on his killing amongst all of the killing that's going on. So where would you go if you want to carry on killing amongst other killing? So he heads out there, and the storyline follows accurately the Second Battle of Ypres throughout it. And I've thrown in some cameos of famous people, so people who were actually there that we don't know much about that they did when they were there. Winston Churchill, for example, was out there in the trenches. He sent himself to the trenches. And John McCrae, who wrote the poem In Flanders Fields, he was out there. So Bolam, the main character, bumps into both of those while he's out there. So it was a bit of a... it was great fun having to do the research and to learn all of the subject and to know the places.
Yeah.
So, I walked, if Bolam walks along a trench in Sanctuary Wood, I've walked along that trench. I've turned the corner and I've gone down the dugout to visualise it. The scene in Hill 60 where Bolam sort of goes down at the crater that's been blown, I've stood at the top of Hill 60 and shut my eyes and visualised what it was like to be able to do it, and read eyewitness accounts. The scene at Hellfire Corner where the British, with I don't know whether it was a sense of humour or just ridiculous idea, we put tarpaulins up so the Germans couldn't see us on posts and came down on horses past Hellfire Corner. But I found an eyewitness account of this horrifying scene there, and I used that to embroider part of the story.
I think that's what often makes a book very, very fascinating, when, yes, it's a mixture of fact and fiction, but it's set in, and you're learning historical facts, true historical facts, amongst all of this fiction, and I often think that makes a very, very fascinating read.
The finale sort of comes where the end of the Second Battle of Ypres, we have tunnelled under the German lines along something called the MAY18 Ridge, and we've tunnelled and put 17 mines under there, which were packed full of high explosive, and we set them off at the same time, and 2 of them don't go off. But that explosion was so massive at the time, it was felt in London. So from Belgium, near Ypres,
Really?
in London, and heard in London. But two didn't go off. One went off in 1953. just went off. Nobody was killed, nobody was hurt because nothing had been built there. But there's still one that hasn't gone off. And every time I go out there, and I'll be going out again in the autumn to do some more research for a new book, I drive along the road that's near it and I think, crikey, it could happen while I'm here, let's get along it.
My goodness. So do you go into schools as well to talk about the magpie?
I do, because I wrote this book. Obviously, being a teacher, I knew what the curriculum was like, but this book, I wrote it as an adult book, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking Key Stage 3 curriculum, because they study World War One, and in history and in English, they study the literature of World War One. So I thought, well, if I can make this accessible to 11, 12, and 13, 14-year-olds, it's got a range from 11 to 111. That's what it is, and it's been picked up by schools. So I get invited into schools to do author visits, to talk about writing, and I talk about the journey that we talked about earlier, from sort of coming from a small coal mining village to ending off, sort of, if you like, achieving a dream and writing a novel and actually having it published professionally. That is a massive dream. So yeah, spending a day with kids like I did yesterday in different parts of the country, it's great.
Free author visits, and I know that you've got a book signing as well happening over the summer, haven't you?
I have. They are free author visits, Lisa, but I've not done one in the Northeast yet.
Well,
so if you're a parent,
Gary.
a grandparent, it needs to be secondary, key stage 3, 11 to 14. So give the school a nudge. I'll come and do a free author visit. Yesterday I did 3 assemblies. So I did 200 year 7s, 200 year 8s, 200 year 9s. The 8th of July in Waterstones in Durham, I'm doing a book signing. So very exciting.
Get Gary booked for an author visit to the school. Go along, see him, meet him, chat to him. 8th of July. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, Gary.
You're welcome. I've loved it. Thank you.
BBC Newcastle playing you Tony Braxton.